The True Crime Society podcast contains adult themes and violence and is not intended for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
If you'd like to skip the intro, please refer to the timestamp listed in the episode description. Thank you.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the True Crime Society podcast with Stephanie and Olivia. Peep is also here. She's trying to get settled. She's having a hard time. She's mad because I don't have a blanket on. She wants a blanket. Otherwise, she doesn't. She just is lost without a blanket, apparently. But it's hot here, so there's no blanket. It is June 13th, 2024 right now, for those who are wondering. It's a big time of year for a lot of people. There's a lot of graduations, end of school stuff, parties. Father's Day is Sunday. And then for me specifically, so Father's Day is the Sunday. My sister's birthday is also at the start of that week. And then the week or like a week and a half after that is my dad's birthday. So I always have a big cluster of things to do around here. Some of my younger cousins are graduating high school and stuff. So
it's funny because
it's
here
be a
is
busy weekend.
Total opposite. So Father's Day here is in September, I think, and then middle of because our school goes on calendar year, so the kids usually start in February after the summer and they finish in December. So this is like mid-year, boring, nothing happening. Like for me personally, I don't really have much going on in June. It's just a very quiet hibernation time of year because it's winter, it's cold, there's nothing going on, everyone's depressed.
Yeah, it really is opposite because everyone's like excited, it's summer, school's ending.
I get FOMO at this time of year when I see all you guys like on your fun summer stuff and I'm like, oh, still so far away.
Yeah. So this weekend I have graduation party to go to one day, and then my father is actually in North Carolina right now, so I'm gonna go hang out with I'm gonna see my husband's parents. We're gonna go do like a brunch thing, and then I'm gonna go over to my sister's because it's her husband's first Father's Day, and we're also gonna do like a little early birthday celebration for her, so that'll be fun. Hopefully there's cake because we all know I'm always scheming for cake, cheesecake, whatever. Any desserts, I'll find a way. Anything exciting going on with you this weekend?
I'm going into the city tomorrow. So it's Friday here. Saturday we're going into the city for 2 nights, which so I'm going with my husband. I feel like I hardly ever go away with him because one of us always has to mind the kids. But we've got babysitters this weekend. We're going into the city for 2 nights with some friends. There's a cool light show on called Vivid. The Aussies will probably know what that is, but basically where they light up all the buildings in Sydney, like the Harbour Bridge, the Opera House. They do cool light shows. So that's ending this weekend. So we will see the last night of it, which is cool. And we're going to a Mexican lunch tomorrow. It's like a 2-hour bottomless Mexican brunch lunch. We're doing it at 3:00, so I don't really think it could be called brunch, but where you get
it's like the end of brunch.
Yeah, palomas, margaritas, all that for 2 hours. So I'm very excited about that.
I love Mexican food. It's so good.
Me too. And the menu sounds amazing. Like they've got this, I think it's called Paloma Pavlova. Do you guys have Pavlova there? I feel like maybe you do.
Yeah, but I've never had it.
So Pavlova, for anyone who doesn't know, it's typically like an Australian or a New Zealand dessert. There's like a bit of debate about what it is, but it's made of like the base of the cake is meringue, so real fluffy meringue, and it's usually topped with like fresh seasonal fruit and cream. And like sometimes when I make it, I put chocolate or like drizzle liqueur over it. So it's just like a delicious. It's my husband's favorite dessert is Pavlova. He always asks for a Pavlova for his birthday cake. So. Yeah, I'm excited for that. That sounds delicious.
Now I want Mexican food. I have nothing because now that my kitchen is pretty much, I was saying on Patreon, like the bulk of it is done. All the installs are done, everything. So I had to like finish paying up the bills because you either pay it up front or it's like you pay the first half and then when it's done you pay the last half. So I had to pay a few more things. So now that I have the kitchen done, I have no money for anything else. So we can just look at it. No food. No dishwasher detergent, nothing.
When we record here, it's Friday morning. So by the time we're finished, it's nearly lunchtime. So sometimes I go and get Mexican as a little treat for myself. I might do that today.
Yeah, I'm like the opposite because it's like I work until 4, so I get home at 4:30ish. And then we record at 6:30ish my time, so I'll have something to eat in between. And then we record for sometimes 2 hours or more, and then I edit the Patreon episode. So I just starve all night, and I just call it a fasting day, basically.
Intermittent fasting day.
Yeah, just gotta have like one a week. Another thing we did want to touch on briefly, just for those who don't know, which I doubt most people do because it wasn't something that was announced. We had to go research to find this answer. We've noticed over time our downloads dropped, but it seemed like we were getting more engagement. Like, we have Patreon, we have a lot of people signing up for Patreon, we get a lot of interaction on our Instagram, and when we post podcast stuff, lots of comments.
Our impressions on Spotify are like the highest they've ever been, so it just kind of seemed to come from nowhere. If you agree with that, it just kind of dropped. We're like, what's going on?
Yeah, like the last couple months, and we just thought maybe it was us, maybe everyone hated us, or it was just a weird slump. So we started researching, and it turns out Apple Podcasts, which I'd say is half our audience. I think Spotify has surpassed people who use Apple now, but it's still a good chunk of our downloads. I guess they changed it because it used to be you'd like subscribe, and then ones you subscribe to or sign up for automatic downloads would just automatically download as soon as the episode came out. So now they changed it where if you don't listen to an episode within like 2 weeks, 15 days, it just cancels your auto downloads and won't download them anymore until you go and manually redo it again, which a lot of people haven't realized. And, if you're someone who doesn't listen to podcasts consistently or every day, like some people do, I think it's easy to forget the shows that you like when you're not always thinking of it, or if you just listen to them sporadically.
It's frustrating because it's like they're trying to dictate how you should listen to a podcast. Like, if you want to subscribe to a podcast and go back and listen when you have a chance, I know some people like to save them and binge when they have like a road trip or at work or whatever. Like, you should be able to listen however and whenever you want. They shouldn't be saying just because you haven't listened, we're going to make this decision for you and basically make things harder for you as a listener.
Yeah, and I also think it's just a good way to. Sometimes there'll be a podcast I want to listen to that I see posted on Instagram or on the go, or I hear like an ad for it on a different podcast I'm listening to where I can't listen to it at that moment. So then you just like sign up so that you don't forget it, or you subscribe or whatever, so you don't forget about it and you can come back to it later. But then if you don't subscribe to it or you forget to go back and listen after a couple weeks, then it just disappears forever.
Yeah.
So just if you guys listen on Apple, just go in and check and maybe resubscribe or
I feel like the
whatever.
main advice is go away from Apple. Apple is so annoying.
Yeah.
It's so glitchy anyway. Like, there's tons of other podcast apps if you don't want to go on Spotify, and like most of them are free. I listen on Overcast to a lot of podcasts, and that's free. So basically, Apple is not a great option. Try and find another option if you can.
Yeah, it's just Spotify. Since we've started the podcast, Apple used to be our like predominant audience. So we first started, and then over the years it shifted more and more where now more people listen on Spotify. I think it's just I've always used Spotify. I've never had an iPhone, so I don't have Apple anything really. But I've always used Spotify. I like it. I know some people prefer other apps like some that you
I don't
mentioned.
even know why I still have another app. Like, I just always did, and then I didn't even really ever think about using Spotify. Now I do sometimes, but I still just have the app because I can just go in and it's just podcasts. Like, I know on Spotify that, it's not that hard to navigate, but I think I'm just setting my ways a little bit.
Yeah, the more you listen on Spotify, like with any other social media or anything, the algorithm starts to know you and starts like giving you what you want. And when there's new episodes of shows you usually listen to, they just come up on the front page and stuff. So just if you are an Apple person, just check in with your fave podcasts and make sure that you're still on there.
It costs nothing to follow or subscribe to a podcast, but it's very, very helpful when you do it for any of your favorite ones.
So I guess we'll stop begging.
Can't wait for all the hate, you guys.
You guys are so desperate. But it's frustrating when things like that happen because it's like out of our control basically, and it does affect us.
And I feel like too, this is the last I'll say it too, we'll move on. But like, we've been working for 3-4 years on this podcast now. It's
4.
been like a long time, and we built it up a lot from where we started to where we are, and it's just disheartening to have a big chunk of that taken away.
Yeah.
When probably the people were very happy to still be subscribed. They just either have different listening habits now that everyone's gone back to work after COVID, or, it's just listen when you want. Don't dictate it to us, Apple.
Yeah. Don't worry, like, we're not going out of business. Like, we're still on the up. Not to sound like we're, like, sad, pathetic losers. But anyway, speaking of podcasts, we did want to share one of our pals that we have worked with in the past.
Yeah, we haven't spoken about them for a while, and like in these tough podcast times, we've all got to stick together. So the podcast we wanted to share with you today is The Murder Diaries. We've spoken about them before. It's such a good podcast. It's a victim-focused true crime podcast series with straightforward storytelling. The hosts are Natalie and Paige, and they present thoughtfully researched cases, often including the family's voice with exclusive interviews.
Every episode of The Murder Diaries is engaging and always respectful. Something that sets them apart is their stunning original artwork honoring the victims on Instagram. And you can follow them at The Murder Diaries Pod. We'll share it when this comes out, or we'll share one of their posts or something to our stories so you guys can find it easily. And The Murder Diaries podcast is available wherever you listen to podcasts. And they are very nice gals. We've chatted with them on Instagram before, so definitely go check them out.
Yeah, I'm just looking on the Instagram now, and they have some cases that, like some kind of lesser known cases as well, which I find really interesting. They don't just cover the really big ones. They cover ones that you may not have ever heard of before. So definitely recommend checking them out.
All right, so what are we talking about today? We are talking about Rex Heuermann and everything that has gone on the last couple weeks. Oh my God. I closed the windows a little bit to record because, now that I live in the suburbs, there's a lot of birds and chirping going on. So one of them's open, honestly, probably about 4 or 5 inches, and Peep has like crammed herself in there to look outside. Meanwhile, the windows in the bedroom are wide open, but she's cramming herself in there. Anyways, so we're going to be talking about everything going on with Rex Heuermann over these last couple weeks. I think we mentioned in our last episode we were planning on talking about, because that was actually when it came out, when we were recording that episode, but it was so last minute that we didn't have time to put that together. So he was charged with 2 more murders. He was charged with the murders of Jessica Taylor and Sandra Castilla, along with the original 4 that he was already charged with. So we are up to 6 right now. And along with those charges came out a whole slew of information. It was a 37-page document that laid out a bunch of evidence as to why they think he murdered these girls, like why they think he should be charged with their deaths, and just some insane stuff that they were finally able to pull off all of the electronic devices that they found from his house. So we're going to go through all of that. And then as well, today, there was this unhinged press conference. If you want to call it a press conference, it was really just like, I don't even know the word for it. It was
a circus.
The circus. Yeah, someone messaged. They were like, I can't believe they forgot to set up their circus tent.
We were talking on Patreon before this about like how crazy and chaotic everything is at the moment, and this just adds to the chaos. Like this case is already pretty chaotic and pretty wild, but what happened today, unhinged. There's not even another word for it. It was just unhinged.
Yeah, I was making the whole time I was listening to this at work with headphones on, thankfully, because it talks about a lot of things that you don't want to be listening to at work. And my face the whole time, I was just like furrowed brow with my mouth open, being like, is this for real? I cannot believe. So we'll get into all that at the end as well. But we will go back and start at the start. Not the full start, because have already done episodes on this. So the start, if you want all the background information, go check out our other episodes on this before you listen to this one. I mean, you probably don't have to if you've seen the news and stuff and know the general story, but it'd be good if you.
It's a big case. Like there's a lot that's gone on up to this point, so I recommend checking it out.
All right, so brief background. On July 14th, 2023, Rex Heuermann was charged with 6 counts of murder in relation to victims of the alleged Long Island serial killer. He was charged with 2 for both of them, right?
Yeah, he was charged with first and second for both. So even though there's only 3 to start, there's 6 charges, yeah.
So the first victims he was charged with, they are part of the Gilgo 4 is what people call them, and it was Melissa Bartholomew, Megan Waterman, and Amber Costello. There was a fourth victim, Maureen Brainerd Barnes. She wasn't included in the first grouping of charges because they were still kind of working on the evidence that they had with her. And I guess they had to pull the trigger on this a little earlier than they wanted to because they said that they felt like he was starting to talk to sex workers again, and they literally arrested him off the streets of New York City while he was just walking on the sidewalk. It was really crazy. It's on video. But it just makes you think of like, how many other serial killers am I walking near that I don't even realize?
Yeah.
So then January 2024, that is when he was charged with the murder of the fourth victim, Maureen. And then fast forward to June 6, 2024, he was charged with the murders of two more women who are Jessica Taylor and Sandra Castilla. And we also learned from the document, it seems like he's being investigated for the death of Valerie Mack, who was always grouped in with the Long Island serial killer victims as well. And she's mentioned a few times in the 37-page document. The document that we're talking about, it was released and we learned a lot of new information about this. So we're going to go through all of that because not everyone has time to sit down and read 37 pages.
And a lot of it is very technical and very, like, if you're into that, that's good. But like, it's not a necessary amount of information that you need for just to follow the case.
It's funny because I might have said it on Patreon, I think, but not to keep being like, we said it on Patreon. I was talking about how I just have a hard time following trials, like watching them, watching the whole thing, usually because I have to work. But even if I didn't, I think I'd have a hard time focusing. I'd rather read like the cliff notes. But stuff like this, 37-page court document like this released, I'll sit there and I will read the whole thing and read it and pay my full attention to reading it. Even all the technical stuff, I don't know why. I just, not to say I enjoy it, but I find them very interesting. And I think I retain the information better.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, everyone learns in different ways. Okay, so the document runs through how Jessica Taylor's remains were found, kind of gives background on both the new victims. So Jessica, she was last seen in July 2003, and she'd been working in the sex industry in Midtown Manhattan. And she last used her phone around July 21st, 2003, and she called her mother, and they spoke for a few minutes, and Jessica made plans to visit her mother in Poughkeepsie, New York on July 25th, 2003. And the last activity on her phone that night was at 10:22 p.m. Not to be that person, but it's weird because I always forget this technically is local to me. Like, I basically work in Poughkeepsie. And like, I've been to the beaches and stuff near where they found the bodies off of Ocean Parkway.
It's so weird when you can like picture. I think that's why everyone is just more into their local crimes, because you're like, wow, I've driven past there, I've been there, I know where this has all happened.
Yeah. So when Jessica didn't arrive to visit her mother on the 25th, her mother called the police. On July 26th, so literally the next day, a person walking their dog in Manorville, New York, found human remains and called the authorities. When police arrived, they discovered the victim was lying on her back with her legs bent underneath her. The body had been decapitated and her arms had been cut off below her elbows. So the victim had a tattoo that seemed like it was severely obliterated by a sharp object, and the remains were soon identified as Jessica Taylor. So then on March 29th, 2011, years later, 8 years later, almost?
Yeah.
Nearly 8 years later, Jessica's skull, hands, and forearm were discovered just east of Gilgo Beach, and these additional remains were found on the same side of the road where the Gilgo 4 girls were found, were Maureen, Melissa, Megan, and Amber. So it was pretty close by. And the other women had been found there in December 2010. So when they were searching more of that area, it seems like they found her remains a couple months after. So all the victims ended up being found at a depth within 50 feet from the edge of the parkway, and Jessica's remains were found less than a mile from the other 4 victims. During the police investigation into Jessica's murder, it was discovered that Rex worked in the same area where she was working as a sex worker. And records show that Rex was present in the same area as Jessica on the date that she vanished. After the first of Jessica's remains were found, police canvassed the area and they spoke to witnesses. And one witness said that on July 25th at around 10:30 p.m., they had seen a dark Chevy pickup back into the woods where Jessica's remains would later be found. That happened around 13 hours prior to the 911 call being made by the person who discovered Jessica.
He really got sloppy with this one. I guess it was kind of, he'd gotten away with it for so long too, but this was a sloppy mistake that, probably tied him to it more easily than he would have been tied to it.
It's known that Rex purchased a 2002 dark-colored Chevy Avalanche in late March 2002, and he owned the vehicle at the time that Jessica's remains are found. They did also talk about this vehicle a lot kind of during the initial charges, because this was the vehicle that he was driving around and maybe picking these girls up or going to meet them, and a few other witnesses had seen this dark-colored truck. And it's kind of a unique truck, which is an interesting choice for him. Like, it doesn't just look like the average pickup truck. It's
any truck
no
that you see
offense,
down the street.
Like,
yeah,
kind of ugly. So records regarding Rex's digital devices reveal that on July 28th, 2003, he read a Newsday article called "Cops Seek Help in IDing Manorville Body." And the article was about Jessica's body being found. And that online activity was then deleted. And around July 29th, he also conducted an internet search for a new Chevy Avalanche, despite his 2002 Avalanche being just over 1 year old. And he would later attempt to delete the search for this new vehicle. So it's like, why are you going to buy this? He really loved that truck that he was willing to get the same one
a totally
in a different
truck.
color.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't even know if they make Chevy Avalanches anymore, but they're probably pissed about this.
Yeah, no, bad press.
They're seething. Rex specifically searched for a different color of the Avalanche at that time. I think he was looking at it in like white or something. So at least do an opposite color, I guess. So when authorities examined Jessica's remains, they found a human hair on her body, and it was found on a surgical drape that had been under her body. So some of these things are going to come back later on, like the surgical drapes and things like that. There's another thing. I don't remember what. Oh, the tattoo thing. The hair was determined to be from a male that had Caucasian or European characteristics. And at that time, it was determined that it couldn't be DNA tested due to unsuitability. So I'm assuming it probably didn't have the root of the hair, because that's what you need to do like a proper full profile DNA test. And nowadays, like, this will come up. They can test hair that doesn't have the root by doing mitochondrial DNA testing. It's not as exact. Like, it doesn't narrow down to one person as much, but it does narrow down to one person a lot. It's more like it's able to figure out your maternal family side. So if it was like yours being compared to your mom's, they would probably almost look exactly the same. So that's kind of the problem with it. But if you already have a suspect and you have a bunch of other evidence against them, it still helps.
Yeah.
So in August 2023, the Gilgo Homicide Task Force submitted the hair for further testing. And when compared to Rex's hair, the profile developed was the same, and it excludes 99.96 of the Northern American population. So even, like once they had Rex, they were able to compare them at least.
Yeah.
Further testing was undertaken on the hair, and it was determined that the hair is 1.837 times.
The numbers don't really matter, but basically it's like a massive percentage more likely to have come from someone who has Rex's DNA profile.
Yeah, so lots of times more likely to have come from a person genetically identical to Rex's genotype file than from an unrelated individual. So police determined that Rex's wife, Asa, and their children were out of state at this time. This seems to have been a pattern for Rex. He chose to kill when his family were not around. The court documents go into a lot of detail about how they corroborated that Asa was on vacation at the time by using things like phone records of calls. Like, so they were staying at some like resort hotel or something, and Rex was making calls to that hotel because I guess maybe they didn't have cell phone. It's back then as commonly. And he was calling the hotel. They were calling him. They also interviewed a friend who went on this like family. I guess it was like two families that went. All the kids were friends. Talked to that person, and she confirmed that they went that day and all that stuff. So it seems like they were definitely away. And this will matter again in relation to this crazy press conference we were talking about as well. But if you want to see more of the like details that would be very boring for us to read.
Yeah, it's
Then
basically highlighted phone records that show this is the
Yeah.
phone number for the hotel, this is where they were. Like,
it's
yeah,
like
it just
Rex
goes
called
into,
in this time like 37 times.
it seems quite thorough in like they've made a big point in the documents of proving that they didn't just say she was on holidays at the time. They've gone into a lot of detail, technical detail about how they've proved that.
Yes, and as someone who's read it, I would say it seems like they were definitely away
Yeah.
pretty much whenever Rex would go and do these things, because that's what he wanted to do. Then he wouldn't have to worry about him being caught and then wondering what he was up to. So if you want to see the details, well, we have the link to the document on our Instagram story highlights if you want to check that out. So the documents also explain that in July 2023, investigators took a hard drive from Rex's house. The drive contained a Palm Pilot backup file which had Rex's date book and calendar, and the file also confirmed Asa's whereabouts at the time of the murder. So like in his little calendar, it was like wife away or
Yeah,
something on
like it
those
listed.
days.
I feel like off the top of my head, I don't have it open, but it was like Smuggler's Resort or something, like
Smuggler's Cove or
something like that. So like basically, it just lists. You know, like when you put in your calendar from Monday to Friday, Asa is away. It's just stuff like that.
He's just like us, just marking your calendar. Then this is the background on the other victim that he was charged with, Sandra. So on November 20th, 1993, so this is one of the older ones, 2 people were hunting in a wooded area near Southampton in Suffolk County, New York. They came across the remains of a female, Sandra Castilla, and she was 28 years old at the time of her death. She was found laying on her back with her arms outstretched. Her uncovered legs were spread apart, her shirt had been pulled up and over her head, and her breasts were exposed. She had sharp force injuries to her face, torso, breasts, left thigh, and genital region. Sandra was originally from Trinidad and Tobago, but had been living in New York before her murder. During the examination of Sandra's body, 3 hairs were found. 2 of the hairs belonged to a female and 1 to a male. So the hairs were tested for the first time in 2014. Unique DNA profiles were created for each. And after Rex was arrested, they were able to test the hairs and compare them to his samples. And in February 2024, it was found that the profile of the male hair excluded 99.96% of the population when compared to Rex's sample. And later testing would also find that the hair is lots of numbers times more likely to have come from a person genetically identical to Rex's genotype file than an unrelated individual. So 1993, back then, Rex had been living with a female known as Witness 3, and this was someone that he was dating at the time. So as an aside, he married Asa in 1996, so this was before her. And Witness 3 and Rex started living together in 1991. She moved out of their home in September 1993, around 2 months before Sandra was murdered. So Witness 3's identity hasn't been made public, but she's known to law enforcement and they have spoken to her about things during this time. So she gave them some DNA swabs in regard to the case. And police compared the swabs to the hair that they found on Sandra and discovered that it was a 99.98% of the population be excluded when comparing the 2 samples. So it was her hair, the woman that he was dating and living with, that was found on Sandra's body. So again, that does tie it back to him.
I can't even imagine how she must feel now. Imagine knowing that she's...
all these years later.
Yeah. Maybe, I don't know. Like, we don't know anything about her. We don't know what type of relationship they had or anything like that. But just imagine knowing that you lived with him and he was doing these, has done these things in his life. That would be mind-blowing.
Yeah, I hope eventually she comes forward because I'd be very curious to know
what he was like.
What he was like, or if there was
we've
any...
spoken about it in the past too. Like, I wonder why he is like he is. Like, was it nature versus nurture? Was he always messed up? Did stuff happen to him to make him messed up? But yeah, I'd love to know more too.
Yeah. So the new documents also stated that over 350 electronic devices were seized from Rex's home. And just to clarify, because a lot of people are like, wait, why weren't these taken the first time? They were taken like when they originally searched the house, but for the mass amount of stuff, they just got through it and they found the evidence that related to these arrests. So they didn't just find this stuff. It just was a lot of work when there's 350 electronic devices. We were talking about in a different episode, like 350 electronic devices seems insane.
Yeah.
Even if you counted like video game consoles and things like that, I think I'd maybe have 30. And that's even seems like too high of a number. So there is a list, and this is what the devices are. So there's 15 cameras, 27 computers, 58 internal hard drives, 22 external hard drives, 46 cell phones, 9
wild.
Wi-Fi routers, 44 micro SD cards, 17 tablets, 42 USB drives, 8 laptops, 50 hotel cards, 4 GPS devices, 11 music devices, 36 SIM cards, and 647 CDs, floppy disks, and tapes.
The floppy disks are so on brand. Like, I can't even remember the last time I saw a floppy disk.
Like, red flag, 100%. And I know it's been said that maybe their home was a little hoardery.
Yeah.
So maybe some of this is just laziness. But 46 cell phones, even if you took all of my old cell phones in my life, I don't even think I definitely haven't had 46 cell phones.
And the thing is too, like, we've all been around since cell phones were invented. Like, they haven't been around for 100 years. They've only been around
it's not
for
like he got a head start.
25 years, let's say, generally. So yeah, that's a lot of cell phones.
And I guess it could be counting like maybe his family member cell phones too, but
yeah, maybe.
It's still a lot. But we do know he used a lot of burner phones.
Yeah. And even to keep the hotel cards, like, I wonder if that was kind of like a souvenir type thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, why? Like, there's absolutely, like, you can't store anything on those. I feel like that would just be some type of weird souvenir thing.
Yeah, I agree.
So the devices revealed Rex's fascination with violent bondage and torture pornography dating back to 1994. The images on there included things like breast mutilation, vaginal torture, sex substitution, which is using objects for penetration, the sexualization of decapitated women, bondage, and whipping. A Word document was found, and it was titled HK 2002-04, so kind of 2002 to 4.
I wonder what the HK stands for.
Yeah, I don't know. I couldn't figure that out either.
Maybe he called himself something else, like something killer.
Yeah, like Heuermann killer or something. I don't know. But anyway, the document was discovered in unallocated space. Allocated space refers to stored data on a computer that is using files that are viewable and are able to be opened by the user. On the other hand, unallocated space refers to available or unstructured data which is not readily viewable and able to be opened by a user. Unallocated space frequently contains room for new data or old data that has been deleted, sent to the recycle bin, or overwritten. For example, when a user deletes data, many users believe the file has been purged forever. However, deleting the file only tells the computer that the space previously occupied by the file is now available. The deleted data will remain in an unallocated space until another file is written over it. So this is just kind of explaining where the file was found on the computer. It was kind of found in an area where he tried to dispose of it, essentially.
Yeah, so I've seen a lot of people be like, oh, wow, why would he do like all this planning? But then he writes this document and leaves it. He did try to delete it. They were just able to recover
get it back. Yeah. So data contained within unallocated space can be retrieved via computer forensic extraction method called file carving. So that seems like what has been done in this case. So analysis of the document discovered that it was a locally created draft and that it hadn't been downloaded from the internet, so he couldn't use it as an excuse. Basically, he had created it on the computer. It was recovered from a hard drive that had been used by Rex. The document was first created in 2000 and had been accessed and modified between 2001 and 2002.
I wonder if they were able to get any of the different like versions at all or anything too.
Be so interested to know. So in the court documents, police call this document the HK planning document and believe that Rex used it to plan and map out the murders. So the whole document is online. We'll put it on the blog too. But basically it says the document begins with a 4-category section with the underlined heading of problems, supplies, DS, and TRG. So TRG appears to be a reference to a target or victim, which obviously it probably stands for target. Maybe I'll just read out. Okay, so I won't read them all because, anyway, we'll see how we go. But basically, there's 4 kind of columns. The first is problems, supplies, DS, and TRG. Under problems, he's got things like DNA, tire marks, bloodstains, fingerprints, plastic bag cat litter, witness, trace source of supplies, foot shoe prints, photos, police stop, truck stuck, fingerprints in gloves, hair and fibre. So these are the things that he has kind of identified as being possible problems at the crime scene or on the victims.
And I think we mentioned this when we briefly talked about it last time. Horrible spelling. Embarrassing.
Yeah. And we were saying too, this must have been before spell check. Like he clearly is not a great speller anyway, and this was probably pre-spell check times. So under supplies, he's listed things like booties, lye or acid, police scanner, which I'm assuming is scanner, rope cord, saw cutting tools, hair nets, photo film, burn can, foam drain cleaner, body washer wipes, tarp and drop cloths, medical gloves, bags, tape, electrical clips, and cargo straps.
It's funny that he put hair nets because it kind of seems like on all the victims so far there was hair left behind, even though it wasn't usually his, or like one time it was, but usually it was someone else's.
I guess he tried to, as time went on, get a little bit more cleverer, maybe once DNA started evolving and the use of DNA in investigation, whereas when he did it in the 90s, it probably wasn't so much of a worry.
Yeah.
So then the next one is DS. He had DS, 1 Mill Road, DS2 question marks, dumpster site, next time recon dumpster locations.
And we said those are DS's meant dump site.
Yeah. So then TRG, which we assume is target, it says T1 Megan question mark, small is good, T Unk black. I'm not entirely, maybe unknown.
I feel like T1 is target 1.
Yeah.
And then made target unknown. Seems like T1, he knew her name was Megan.
Yeah.
Made target unknown. And it says black. Maybe it was a black woman he saw that he hasn't interacted with yet, but maybe is a possible target he's interested in. Very creepy.
So in regards to the DS section where he talks about Mill Road being the dumpster site, the remains of Jessica Taylor as well as the remains of Valerie Mack were discovered in locations in the vicinity of Mill Road, which is obviously dump site 1 at Mill Road. In March 2011, Jessica's torso, skull and hands were recovered at maybe the second dump site, which is kind of where he's put the question marks.
Under target, just as like small is good. And they did specifically note that it's important to note that the known victims this far are all petite women, which is consistent with the small is good entry in the document.
So the document then goes into a 3-category section with the headings of pre-prep, prep, and post-event. Under pre-prep, he's got vehicle, it says Vic Insp, which I'm assuming is vehicle inspection, engage T1, recon DS1, locate DS2, weather report, recon video cams, and recon pick zone for video cams. So he obviously wants to check his vehicle, engage the first target, scout out the dump site, and locate the dump site.
Well, so it says engage target 1. So he has target 1 in this document listed as Megan, and then recon dump site 1. So I wonder if he wrote this when because he didn't always dismember people. So I wonder if that's why there's 2 dump sites that he planned to, because, the remains were found in 2 different places for some of them. So it's so fucked. Like.
So then under prep, which is the next section, he's got set up stage, holding area, build table, crossbar, and hard point. So crossbar is often placed, is kind of like a structure that is placed underneath a heavy object for support. So I'm guessing, the heavy object is probably the body in this, this scenario. The hard point in that apparently refers to suspension bondage, which is interesting. So it says basically it's a fixed attachment point in the ceiling that supports the weight of an individual being suspended off the ground. So this is obviously goes along with his pornography obsession where he talks about women being suspended, tortured, bound, decapitated, and their breasts mutilated. And then post-event is the next one. He's written destroy file, DISTROY file, change tires, burn gloves, dispose of pics, have story set. So I feel like a lot of those are self-explanatory. He obviously, tires so they can't trace the tire tracks. That's a lot of T's. Burn the gloves so they're gone. A lot of that is kind of self-explanatory about why he's planning to do that. So then he goes on. The next section is called recon reports. He's written on their video cams. Does that say lie? Is that Long Island Expressway?
Video cameras on, Long Island Expressway.
Yeah. Video cams on Long Island Expressway, Route 112 to Route 110 equals 33 old. Video cams on SS Parkway, Route 231 to exit 30 equals 10 old. And then he goes T1 info, and they've got the cell phone and a voicemail number listed on there. Then he talks about the takedown and pickup. So I'm assuming this means kind of where he's finding his victims or, picking them up essentially. The points are hunt too long, seen in area too long. Remember, don't charge gas. Recon for video cams in pickup area next time. So these are all notes to himself about how he can probably better get away with the crimes. Don't charge gas so there's no paper trail. Look for video cameras to make sure that you're not seen.
And the pickup area, I'm assuming, is where he's meeting the girls.
So then he goes on to talk about body prep, which is obviously after he kills. He's written, wash body inside and all cavities, remove trace evidence, fingerprints and hair, remove trace DNA, remove ID marks, tattoos and marks, remove marks from torture, remove head and hands, and package for transport. So obviously when we mentioned earlier too, Jessica's tattoo had been attacked with a sharp object in an attempt for it to be either disfigured or removed. So that goes along with his point of removing ID marks.
Mm-hmm.
He then goes on to say dispose of the following: tools and devices, T1 clothes and personal items, drop cloths, wipes and towels, props, toys, wood items, anything that touched T1, what you wore, destroy book and computer files, burn gloves, dispose of plastic I'm assuming bags, to avoid trace. He's written then also things to remember. Sound travels, i.e. bird outside, control the amount of air in and out to control the noise made. Get sleep before the hunt, too tired creates problems. Hit harder, too many to take down, consider a hit to the face or neck next time for takedown. More sleep and noise control equals more playtime. Use push pins to hang drop cloths from the ceiling, not tape. Use heavy rope for neck. Light rope broke under stress of being tightened. So just so sick and unhinged.
It's so eerie because you know that this is notes from the past time he did it and how he can improve essentially. It's just sickening.
And also that he makes a lot of references, like he said, hit to the face or neck next time. And then when he talks about looking for video cameras for next time. So it's clear that he wasn't finished. He was still planning to conduct more murders.
Yeah, and another thing, he talks about the drop cloths here and the section above. And I think it was Jessica Taylor's body. They found one of the surgical drapes, which is the drop cloths with her body.
So there is also a notes section in the document. Under the notes, he's written, spur of the moment, cover ? Stockholm Syndrome. The more you do, the more clues you give. Look at the painting. What, why, who? Organized versus disorganized. And he's absolutely butchered the spelling of those. Sometimes it's just kind of a letter here and there, but I don't know what he's done with that.
But it's funny because he spelled organized and the organized and disorganized very wrong the same way twice. It's organized.
Then he says page 162, sex substitution, page 163, page 175, mutilation, which I'm assuming is meant to be mutilation, equals disorganized, whatever he wrote. So they have found that the pages he quoted are from the Mindhunter book, which is authored by John Douglas, which is about the criminal profiling of serial killers. So when he talks about sex substitution, which is what we mentioned earlier, which is the penetration of an object, John Douglas describes in the book rather horrible sexual mutilation and masturbation over the victim's body. So he's made a note specifically of that page. When he talks about mutilation on page 175, John Douglas describes a woman's screams and shortly after how the woman's throat had been cut and her naked body had been mutilated. He also said in the book that mutilation is a sign of disorganized personality type. So Rex has obviously taken a lot from this book and is making
I just
notes
wonder
about
why
it.
he wrote it. Is this stuff he wants to remember to do, or stuff he does, or stuff he doesn't want to do because he doesn't want to be categorized? Why was he writing down these pages?
So one other note that Rex wrote was, look at the painting, What, Why, Who. This is also from the Mindhunter book. On page 19, John Douglas said that while he was still at the FBI, he always advised his agents, if you want to understand the artist, which is the perpetrator, you have to look at the painting, which is the victim. He goes on to say, we've looked at many paintings over the years and talked extensively to the most accomplished artists. So that's why they believe Rex had written, look at the painting.
Yeah, because it seems like he put in a lot of thought into how his victims were found, either by dismembering their bodies and dumping them in 2 different places. The Gilgo girls, some of them were basically hogtied. They were all bound in some type of way. Sandra, one of the earlier ones, she was posed in what they assume was meant to be like a sexual way, with her shirt up over her head so that her breasts were exposed and her legs were left like open in a sexual manner as well. So it seems like that's why he was thinking of the painting, which is just like, get over yourself.
It's like he with some serial killers, they just had the urge to kill.
Narcissism.
Whereas it feels like he really studied and wanted to be a good serial killer. Like, he didn't want to be disorganized. That's why he's making notes about what to do. And it's like he really, really, really studied it deeply.
Like, he wanted the fame and the notoriety of being like, we never knew who he was, and like, look how crazy this case is. Like, what a crazy man. Yeah.
So the other things he noted, spur of the moment, Stockholm Syndrome, the more you do, the more clues you give. They were all from the Mindhunter book. The book was also found in Rex's home, in his home office. There was a book they also found called The Cases That Haunt Us. So that also talks about several murder cases.
It's also funny, just going back to what we were saying, how he thinks he's like so smart and like reading, studying, doing the painting thing, like really thinking about it. Dude, you can't even spell disorganized.
Or hevey.
Please.
Like, hevey, he spelled Hevey. Like, like disorganized maybe is a little bit explainable. It might be a little bit tricky to spell for some people, but then like some of the words are just basic. And like, there's been a lot of comments that he's probably a highly educated person. He's an architect, but he's still a horrible speller.
Architects are good at math.
So that is it in summary for the new 37-page document that we got in the last few weeks. It's not really surprising based on what we already know. It just kind of emphasizes how messed up and horrific he is and was.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I've said before, I really like again, it sounds bad saying like, but I find it interesting learning about the actual investigation and like the evidence that they have, and how they're really able to take all these different things and kind of paint a picture of the night and what happened. So that's why I think I like reading these documents, because I've always been very interested in the investigation, forensic science type stuff. So if you're into that, I suggest reading it, because there's a lot of other technical stuff where if we read it out loud, it would have been boring, but it's interesting to read. But even though I'm glad that even though with all the corruption, which we've talked about in past episodes, that was going on with like the Suffolk County Police Department at the time, it seemed like this case would never be solved. It does seem like now they've been able to gather like a lot of evidence against him, and we were saying that we think there's definitely going to be way more victims, probably I would assume all of the Long Island serial killer victims, and maybe even more.
Yeah, it seemed like with these documents, I know you said like maybe not the right word, but I'm interested to read them because it kind of cuts out all the noise. Whereas when there's a trial, there's back and forth, there's kind of arguing. This is evidence, like this is what they're
like
saying.
Trickery.
They're like, we have this evidence. This is why we are stating these things, and it's just kind of, it cuts out a lot of the noise, which is why I personally find it so interesting. I suspect that charges for Valerie will be coming shortly. It's a wild case. I can't even imagine being an investigator on this case, because when in our earlier episodes too, we spoke about other possible suspects, and it turns out it was probably just this random architect in New York City the whole entire time, and
who's like
none of us.
6 feet tall, a huge ogre.
Yeah, never on anyone's radar that I can ever find in terms of being a possible suspect. Everyone else, like we spoke about in the past, and then all of a sudden it's just this random architect with a family.
Yeah. And we didn't really talk about Valerie Mack in this rundown because he wasn't charged with her murder yet, but she's grouped with Jessica Taylor a lot because they were kind of found similarly. So in the document, like they do specifically mention her too in passing. Like she doesn't have a big write up yet, but she is mentioned a few times. So
So yeah, we'll keep you updated once any other charges or we learn any other information, but that's kind of it in terms of the document. This last week, though, there have been a few other developments or things of interest that we just wanted to chat about quickly. One was that they have found some old photos of Rex, which I found interesting because we haven't really seen much of him before he was arrested. But these photos were taken in 2006, so a fair while ago. He's at a gun club. It's called the Small Arms Firing School program. So there's photos of him with who some people say is his stepson, I believe. They're kind of like crouched down firing guns, and there's one of Rex standing up holding a Coke can wearing a hat. Like he looks exactly as you would picture a creep to look. That's my opinion anyway.
Yeah, a bad day for Coke also. Chevy Avalanche and Coke.
Yeah. So
but he just looks
he looks
derpy.
like a derp. Yeah, like a dweeb. He looks like exactly how he looks now, but just a little bit younger. Yeah. He's wearing like a red hat, kind of like a khaki coat.
He's got the serial killer glasses.
And it almost looks like too his t-shirt is all stained. Like he just looks like he hasn't had a shower for a long time. He looks as you would expect, essentially.
Yeah. I'm wondering if his shirt says Army, but
yeah, I thought that too, because you can see the RM. Like I can't even, it must be something along those lines, but
yeah, not overly noteworthy, but also just like you said, it's interesting to see.
Do you want to talk about the press conference today because you watched them all?
Yeah. So then I'll talk about the press conference just briefly. I don't have written up formal notes about it. I just kind of wrote down notes while I was watching it. Honestly, it's one of those things where you feel bad even talking about it because it's so absurd and you don't want to keep perpetuating this, but it's just, it needs to be spoken about. Yeah. So basically, there's an attorney named John Ray, and he always says he's representing the victims' families, but I don't know who else he's representing because it's none of the girls that Rex has been charged victims, with their murders. Yeah. So he's been representing Shannon Gilbert's family, and if you followed this case, you'll know she has like a mysterious death. People group her in with the Long Island serial killer victims. People think she could be a Long Island serial killer victim, but police have come out and said that they think her death was like an accident. Yeah. Like, I'm not going to get into the whole story about it, but basically them investigating her death is what led them to find the Gilgo 4 bodies. So that's her connection. I don't know why he's meddling in this still. I think he's very desperate to prove that Shannon Gilbert is a Long Island serial killer victim. And he loves to talk about how he's not doing this for money, but all he does is talk about himself. He is totally acting like a martyr. He keeps mentioning how he's like the gatekeeper and they're going to solve the crime and basically like trying to say the police suck. I think he's really just desperate for the fame of proving that Shannon Gilbert is a Long Island serial killer victim. So anyways, he announces yesterday that he's having this press conference with like a release that looks like a middle schooler wrote it. It was so stupid. We're all like, what? It basically said like, we will prove that Rex Heuermann wasn't living a double life. In this press conference, I think what he's trying to say is that the family knew about it, but he does such a horrible job that the whole time you don't even understand the point. So he specifically targets Rex's daughter, Victoria, and they dug up her old Tumblr account. If you don't remember, Tumblr was just like a place where you'd follow other people's Tumblrs, you'd repost pictures onto yours. It was just like a blog of pictures, basically, in a way. It was very trendy back in the day.
It kind of goes with what we were saying last week about how if you could see what you put on the internet 10 or 15 years ago, it makes you cringe.
Yeah,
like
so
it's that kind of thing. Yeah.
John is the first one to talk, and he is basically trying to... First, I have to say these notes. They can't even pronounce the Heuermann last name right.
Yeah, I did notice it. I'm like, what is going on with that? It's a very weird pronunciation.
They say like Heuermann, like I don't even know what they were saying.
Heuermann or something like
that. Yeah, that's what it was.
I heard it a few different ways.
This man always dresses like a lunatic.
He's very flamboyant. He wears like patterns and hats and stuff like that.
Yeah. And normally, whatever, I'm fine, but I don't like him. So He's wearing a pink scrunchie. Excuse me. He hands out copies of the things they're going to be showing on their posters to the reporters that are there, and make sure to be like, those are color copies. Those were expensive. Like, talking about how expensive the copies were. It's like, what the fuck is going on? So that sets the scene for you. So, like I said, they're focusing on the daughter Victoria. First, they're trying to like paint that she is like two different people. They're like, oh, when the media was at the Heuermann house, when the family went back, Victoria was wearing like a nice skirt and looked like a nice proper schoolgirl. And for the record, Victoria today is 27 years old. So when all these murders happened, she would have been very young. She never would have been older than 13. And for like the Gilgo girl, she would have been 10. So anyways, he's saying how she looked like a cute, proper girl. And then he pulls up another photo. He's like, but this is the real her. She's wearing a shirt with a skull on it, a human skeleton, sickening. And everyone's like, what? And then he finds another photo of her online wearing like a more gothic type makeup. So it's getting very like satanic panic off the bat.
This is Victoria Heuermann. All right, we're giving out this is the first packet. There will be 2. And all of this will be online as well. So if we run out, forgive me. By the way, the full color ones were extremely expensive, and we have a budget. We say that the evidence we have, and this is just the beginning of the evidence you will see today, the evidence that we have suggests that we've been sold a story by the Heuermann family. Take a look at the first page and the picture that's to the right. That's Victoria Heuermann as she tried to appear to the press when you first confronted her at the home in Massapequa Park. There she is in her little girl's uniform. She's 27 years old with a school bag draped over her. Her hair in a nice little bun. Very innocent looking person. The other picture is also Victoria Heuermann, as she really is, as she portrays herself on the internet, as she actually looks. We've been sold a bill of goods. If you look at her artwork, in the top page, her artwork consists that she posted online of a human skull. That's just the beginning. After the indictments, oddly enough, and you folks took the picture, you see Victoria Heuermann walking out, I believe from her house. And I thought it was odd when I saw it. But you'll notice she's wearing a shirt that depicts, right after her father is indicted, for these murdered women, it depicts a human skeleton. That's what she's wearing.
So then they go into her old Tumblr account, and he also makes a point to say how all of her other social media and Asa's have been deleted because they're trying to probably hide these things. But we found it. It's like they probably deleted it because everyone is trying to look them up and look at their stuff and do shit like this. He tries to make it seem like this is stuff that Victoria herself had posted or her artwork, but it's not. It's other Tumblr accounts that she followed. And granted, she did follow a lot of like furry pornography type things, hardcore like BDSM stuff. There's like some gore stuff, artwork. So it is some darker stuff, but this isn't stuff she posted. It just accounts that she followed and they posted these things. After he gives like some dramatic spiel about it, there's somehow 4 other people standing up there with him confidently, ready to speak about this. Another woman speaks and she goes into what furries are and how she followed accounts that posted furry pornography and like cartoon pornography and hentai and all this stuff, which don't really see why this is relevant.
Yeah.
So then they're showing photos that are shared by these accounts. Again, that she did not share herself. There's one photo, I'm pretty sure people think it's from the video game Silent Hill, and it shows like some bodies hanging, so you see their feet, and it's very spooky looking. And one of the bodies that's hanging is missing a shoe, so they're only wearing one shoe. And these are, I'm not lying, these are the comparisons that he's making that he is acting like is groundbreaking. She says how one of those bodies, there's only one shoe. You know who else only had one shoe? Sandra Castilla. She was only wearing one shoe. It must be a fetish. Seems like a common thing. Like, okay.
We chose these pictures because of the significance in relation to Rex Heuermann as well as his daughter, Victoria. Take a look. It's people hanging. That's what she's looking at. But look particularly at this particular person hanging. There's a shoe missing. Sandra Castilla was found with a shoe missing. This seems to be a fetish that was indulged in by Rex Heuermann, a fetish that is depicted and looked at by his daughter. That's a connection.
Then there's another one, another picture they showed. It's art. I don't know what medium. I don't know if it's a painting or what, or just like a photo. It's like a woman who is like stabbed by a deer's antlers. So she's like up on the deer. In this one, he's like, you see what's in the background? A marsh. And this woman, she's laying on her back. You know who else was in a marsh on their back? Shannon Gilbert.
There is a woman who's completely garroted by the horns of a deer head, which is a favorite theme in this picture she's looking at, deer. They have to do with witchcraft. And you can see what's happened to the woman. But notice, there's a marsh in the background, and this woman is laying on her back, just as Shannon Gilbert was found. Make of that what you will.
So he's making a lot of just dumb comparisons like that. There's another one. It was graphic. It showed like a murder, but it was from, it's anime. Like it's from an anime show or something. And one of these anime characters clearly looks like they're Asian, has brown hair, and he literally goes, and this man here, is that not a hairstyle similar to Rex Heuermann?
Oh my God.
So, that he has brown hair? Okay. So, and then he keeps saying, like, make of that what you will. Make of that what you will. There's also things that he says looks like witchcraft from accounts that she followed. Oh, another one. One of the accounts she followed posted a room with blood in it. And he's literally like, a room with blood. Sound familiar? Like their basement. So basically then he goes on to say that the whole family is demonic cannibals that knew what was going on and that they actually enjoyed living in a house that they knew bodies were murdered in. He also then, there is one piece of art that Victoria actually did herself, and he tries to describe it as a monster or monsters that are eating a woman, and the woman has a furry butt plug.
I feel like
he says this.
The words he actually, like, he used those words, but the words were like a furry butt plug hanging out. I was like, what?
Yeah. And looking at the picture, I don't see that.
There is actually artwork produced by Victoria. If you look, there's this horrifying monster with blood eating on the breasts of this woman who has a furry butt plug hanging out the back. She produced this art.
It's very like abstract looking. I see, it's probably a woman's body. It's probably a little gory, but I would not look at that and be like, oh, a butt plug hanging out of her butt.
Like, I would
What?
probably more likely to, it was something about menstruation or something like that. Like, that's what I would
That's what I've
think.
seen other people say. Like, it
Yeah.
looks like more
It's blood
period
and-
pain
yeah,
type of.
Yeah.
I think when he says furry butt plug, we're all thinking like furry as in fuzzy, but I think he's trying to say as in like the furry pornography, because I can't believe I'm talking about this on something that my family members listen to. There are butt plugs that have like tails on the end, so then it looks like you have a tail. Now remembering that like my family listens to this, I'm horrified. So yeah, I don't really know. Like it doesn't look like that.
No.
Clearly. So yeah, that's the one thing that she actually did in all of this. And then there was another interesting thing where then the reporters were asking questions. And you could tell all the reporters are like, what is going on? Because he wasn't even, I suggest watching it because even me just giving you a summary or you reading the summary, it doesn't do it justice. It was so disorganized, so unhinged. At some points, it seems like he's blaming Victoria, saying that she knew about this, maybe even helped him find victims and things like that. And it seems like he's saying she's involved in it, but then he'll back off and be like, no, like, we just think like they knew about it. So you're saying two totally different things here.
How this whole press conference came around was yesterday he released a statement. I've just got it here. I'll read it. So it says, for immediate release, Rex Heuermann was not leading a double life. New important evidence uncovered as to his family. Then it says, surprising new important evidence regarding the family members of Rex now has been uncovered, according to John Ray, who's the attorney for Shannon Gilbert's family and for other victims of Rex Heuermann, which is a lie apparently. John Ray will release the evidence to the press at a press conference and just list where it's at. Attendance is limited to members of the press and to law enforcement authorities. So at the time we're like, wow, I wonder what he's got. But what he had was this where he's basically insinuating that the whole family were in on it with Rex and they knew exactly what he was doing, which is what exactly you just finished up saying.
But it's also just like the whole thing. You're like, so what? Like, it's very much like leave it to the police, my man. Leave it to the police, please.
And it made me laugh because it says attendance limited to members of the press and law enforcement, and no law enforcement went. It was just these journalists and him.
They've made a comment since being like, there was no law enforcement there and we don't have any comment.
They must be so annoyed at him. He must be such a pain in their ass.
Yeah, and we're laughing at it because it's so ridiculous and insane. But really, what he's doing is so disgusting and awful and terrible to this poor girl.
It's exploitative.
Who's gone through this trauma. And if anything, I don't think it's weird as a teen to be interested in darker stuff. And especially, it's not even stuff she's posting. It was just accounts that she followed. It's not her artwork. It's not images she was creating and saving and posting. When we were younger, especially in the earlier days of the internet, we all went on rotten.com or whatever and we all watched a beheading and we were all like, ugh. And we've all looked at crime scene photos as people who are interested in true crime. And did we all have like a weird little goth phase when we were younger? Maybe not all of us, but some of us definitely did. And so I don't necessarily think it's strange. I think that they picked some of the worst photos that they could from these accounts that she followed to show, because some of them did show like dismembered hands and stuff like that. So they picked ones, I think, that fit the narrative that they're trying to tell. But I think it also shows I would assume that she did not have a great upbringing, probably was either neglected in some sense or just her dad is a serial killer. I doubt he was that great of a guy. I'm sure there was some turmoil in this family, and I don't think it's weird when kids have a tough upbringing for them to be like a little more gothy unusual, or into darker things. One comment I wanted to read that I saw on Reddit just to kind of sum it up in a more clear way. Someone said, I'm confused. Is the aim of the press conference to explicitly tie her to the horrific crimes as culpable, or to shine light on the possibility that other family members may have been more aware of what Rex was up to than they claim? Because the latter doesn't seem like that much of a stretch. And someone responded and said, I was thinking the latter, but he should have made that more clear, either that the family knew more than they've claimed, or that even she grew up with a weird, creepy father who got her interested in this stuff. But this guy jumped back and forth from her being involved to her being a victim. I think the press conference would have gone over better saying that she grew up knowing some dark stuff, or was possibly exposed to or groomed into this culture from her father, but not that she could have been involved in the murder. So I do agree. I feel like that's what he wanted to say, but it did not come off that way at all.
He took the wrong angle with the apparent information.
It just seemed like he was exploiting her in like weird, embarrassing, teenage years. No offense to like any furries who are listening, but it's like, why are you putting this out? What does
Yeah.
her looking at furry stuff years ago have to do with this? I just feel awful for this girl.
One thing too I just wanted to say quickly is we asked people if they had any questions or comments or anything about the new documents, and a lot of the comments were along the same theme of how could especially the wife not have known about this when 350 electronic devices, including, like, I'm just going back up so I can read out a few of them again just to reiterate, 15 cameras, 27 computers. Like, that is a lot of computers to have in a house at one time. Like, all these things, how could she not have known? And like, a lot of questions were basically, did she leave town on purpose so that she knew what he was doing and this kind of enabled him to do it? I feel like that kind of ties back into this press conference today where he's insinuating that the family maybe knew more or enabled Rex to carry out these murders, not insinuating that they were involved in the actual act of murder, but basically there's a lot of pieces of evidence that people find unbelievable. Now they know about them that the family didn't also know.
Yeah, I think Asa is a little shady, but
Yeah.
I still think it was more so she turned a blind eye to it purposefully. We don't know if he was abusive to them at all. We don't know what their home life was like. I think maybe she just was like, I'm not getting into it. I'm ignoring this. I know he's up to something weird, but I really don't think she knew that he was a serial murderer.
I feel like
Maybe
she
she thought he
knew
was
that.
hiring escorts
Yeah,
or
I feel like she
doing
knew
weird
about his
sex
kind of
stuff.
sexual proclivities. Like, she knew maybe he
Yeah.
was, exactly, hiring escorts. And I'm sure that she participated in swinging at one point with him, if I feel like I remember rightly from one of our old episodes. So they clearly had some sexual things going on, and maybe she was just like, look, you go and do this. I'm going out of town for the week or the whatever, however long it was. But yeah, I still wouldn't be surprised if she did know maybe about a few of the murders, but I'm also wouldn't be surprised either way if she just had turned a blind eye and let him do his thing.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'm putting too much faith in her. I don't think she would have known about the murders. I mean, why? I'm assuming she loves her children. I mean, like, we don't know much about them, but if I was her, I wouldn't want me or my children around someone who I knew murdered someone. But I also think it was a situation where Rex really had control of everything, and that was mentioned early on too. Like, she had basically no access to the finances. She had to use like welfare type stuff just to get by because Rex wouldn't give her access to any of the money. He controlled everything. And I've seen some reports say that like the basement was his area and the basement was very hoarded and like they weren't allowed in the basement. So I just think we don't really know enough information to be assuming these things. And especially if they really didn't know anything, I think it's just like really hurtful for these rumors to be going around on the internet, especially about the kids, especially about the daughter. Like, she was a kid when this happened. I wouldn't be surprised if Rex like exposed them to darker things and it was a darker environment in the home.
I agree.
A lot of people do think Asa was involved just because I've seen so many people ask about these fucking hairs and it's so annoying to me. Like, I'm not even that well educated, not to be like in forensic science, but I did take forensic science in college and stuff like that. And as a girl, your hair gets everywhere. Everywhere.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's shocking when he probably had these girls at the house. He wrapped their bodies in surgical drapes or burlap or whatever, or they were in the car. It's so easy to get a woman's hair on you because women shed hair like crazy. So people are just like, how would her hair get there? And it's sad because even though the stuff about the daughter is so ridiculous to anyone who has an ounce of common sense, I still saw so many people just going with it because people love a conspiracy, love the drama. Some people just go with it. And I have seen people already saying horrible things about his daughter.
Yeah. I feel like we asked her to, just to circle back to that quickly, her behavior after this, like how she's still going to the court. But then I feel like a lot of that is probably because of this TV documentary or whatever that she's taking part in.
Yeah, like
so she's probably trying to recoup some money, maybe make some money off this because essentially she's going to need it now. So like, I guess that, there's two sides to that. I can see for that reason why she's doing it, but then it also makes people side eye her and like, what are you doing?
Yeah, and I agree. I don't like that either. I'm like, you need to be, you can't be being like, oh, I'll decide after. It's like they pulled this document off your computer and your hair was on one of those girls' bodies.
Yeah.
So, but I think that is a good point that the documentary could be like, oh, like go to the, because how else is she going to get the scoop if she's not going?
Exactly. And like other things, I know I'm harping on about Asa, but like a lot of the comments and questions we have are about her. And one of the things I read was, how is she still living in the house? I think you have to remember too that this is real life. Like the house looks like it was dilapidated, falling down, old, needs a lot of work anyway. Plus,
and then police went in and
that's what I was
fucked
going
it
to say.
up.
So after the police trashed it during the search, because it sounds like they had to take so much stuff. Like I'm sure they went in walls, they probably went in roofs and floors and
They
things
cut
like that
out
as well.
parts of the floor, the tub.
So
like,
all of that would have to be rectified. And who is going to want to live there anyway? Like they'd have to probably sell it at some type of loss, or like I just feel like there's reasons I can absolutely understand why she's still in that house. She probably can't move. She probably can't afford it. So
yeah, and I don't know how that works when are their finances frozen? Does she have access to them? Like,
it sounds like
how
they
does that
had
all work?
shitty finances anyway. Like, wasn't he in, from our first episodes, I remember he was in a lot of debt, and like they actually didn't have much behind them in terms of solid finances. So now she's managing without the breadwinner. She's got 2 children, plus dealing with legal fees, plus dealing with all this other stuff that she's got to deal with. You know, obviously, if it comes out and she's involved, that's another story. But at the moment, she's not charged with anything. Police have been very, very firm in their belief that she wasn't in town, the children weren't in town, you know, basically that she wasn't involved in the murders at least. So she just has to continue with her real life at this point.
Yeah, and I just think, like, obviously these crimes are horrible and a lot of people are invested in it, maybe people who don't typically follow true crime because it's a bigger story. But I think people just hear these horrible things and they're so like reactive and emotional about it that it's so easy for people to be like, well, I wouldn't be living there, or I would move, or I would do this, I would do that. But like you said, like it's real life and it's not always that easy. And I just, again, maybe I'm being too nice and I'll like bite my tongue if it comes out that things are different. But I just wish that people would give more grace to the people who are actually in these situations, because it's very easy to say what you would do as someone who's not in the situation and you don't know what is going on like behind the scenes and how it all is. So I just wish people wouldn't do that.
I feel like too, in a case like this where things are so wild and unbelievable and horrific, and like it's almost too horrific to believe what he did to those women, but then it is real life. He did do those things. This isn't a story. This isn't a movie. There's all these other people on, you know, and even with all the victims' families, like you got to remember that it's not just this wild and sensational story. There's now all these grieving people who are now affected by what he's done.
And from what I remember, they don't have like family around here either.
No,
really.
Alice's
her family
from
lives in different
Europe.
country.
Yeah.
Like Iceland?
Yeah. Rex has a brother, I think, but even then,
who lives in like North Carolina.
Yeah. So it's not like they have a huge support system here, it doesn't seem either. So
yeah, so I mean, I do understand why people side-eye Asa. I'm not trying to be like, no, like leave her alone, she's amazing. I definitely don't think she's amazing. I also side-eye some of the things, but I think especially the daughter and the kids, like leave them alone. Like this poor girl, her father, she finds out her father's a serial killer, probably didn't have a great life, and now like all of her weird cringy imagine someone having a press conference about shit that you posted when you were a teen online, trying to be like angsty and different and cool. I would die. I told you I can't even handle Facebook memories. A press conference.
A little status reminder, and then she's just had all her teenage angst aired for the whole world today.
Ugh, makes me sick thinking about it. Oh my god, poor thing.
So the documentary with Asa is going to be on Peacock. I don't know when it's due to come out. I've just looked it up, but yeah,
is
Peacock.
50 Cent still producing?
I don't know. It says slated to begin next year, so that was last year. So we know they have been filming. So I'm assuming they'll probably want to get it out fairly soon while this is all still happening.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, be interesting to watch.
People are like, I can't believe she's doing a documentary, blah, blah, blah. If someone offered you $1 million or however much money, it's at least $1 million, are you going to say no? Honestly?
Yeah, exactly.
Honestly.
You've already, like, what have you got to lose now? Everything is out there already. Like, you might as well try and recoup something from it.
It's like people are always so quick to be like, I would never sell out for that. I would never do that. Yeah, because no one's offering you $1 million.
Yeah.
You're not saying no to $1 million as an average person or a person who's suffering financially.
And also, like for her, it might be, I feel like we've spoken a lot about this, but for her, my last point will be that this might be a chance for her to tell her story or to kind of
rebuild her life, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Like to tell things how she saw them and what happened via her eyes. Whereas now we just kind of know what Rex did and everyone's like, well, she must have known. Maybe she really didn't. Maybe this will be the chance that she needs to, turn her life around and start a new chapter.
And maybe not. Maybe she is a piece of shit and we'll see it in the documentary. We can all be angry about it together. Who knows?
Yeah, we should do a watch party when it comes out.
Oh, yeah, that'd be cool. All right, so we've chatted enough about this. I could talk about this all the time because it's just such a crazy one. But we'll end it there. I'm sure more info will be coming out over the months, so we'll continue to follow it. We'll have a blog on this at truecrimesocietyblog.com, and if you want to just follow the latest updates and everything, make sure you're following us on Instagram at True Crime Society. And if you want to see our personal accounts, what we're up to, mine is StephSum_, Olivia's TCS Olivia. And make sure you check us out on Patreon if you're interested in more content or even just don't want to hear the ads anymore, because we do all the episodes ad-free. We do weekly bonus episodes, so there's even more content. You get 2 episodes a week then. And we have some fun group chats where we just all chat throughout the day, send pet pics, whatever. So check us out on Patreon. And, I mean, everything we said at the start, I won't regurgitate, but check your auto downloads. Leave us some nice 5 stars, share the podcast, your Instagram stories, and all that is a big help to us. And that's it. Long episode, unless I edit it down enough, but it'll probably be a long one. So thank you guys for listening. Stay safe out there and be friggin' nice, please. Peace out.